Hello,
Hi there.
everyone hear me?
Yes, just well, very well. How's everybody feeling and doing? Everybody healthy?
Worried about the numbers, but feeling fine.
Yes. Yeah, it happens. We come and go with those numbers, don't we? Depending on what's happening.
Yep.
I saw something that after the football game last night and so many people gathering to see the football game, that all the numbers are going to go high again.
Yeah, I think that's what someone else was saying about the reason they're going up now is because people go to bars and that sort of thing. So who knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
I'm waiting here. We'll wait a little bit for people to come.
Not a problem. Yep.
I know a number of people told me they'd be here, but you never know when they show up.
It's not like you have to get in the car and drive anywhere, you know, if you're doing the dishes.
Yeah.
You have to just stop and wait.
Yeah.
Well, we're waiting for the next hurricane down here. It's headed our way again, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully it's not going to hit us. It'll go west. That's the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck.
Good, yeah, exactly. You know, it's really weird. A tornado, it comes, it's done. You don't need to worry about it. Hurricanes, they started, let's see, today's Tuesday. About Sunday, they started saying, better go out and get that water. Better go out and get that, you know, because they don't know where it's going to be. They don't know. It's just is.
So you have to be extra careful.
Careful and ready, yeah.
Here we have a bunch coming in now.
Ah, there we are.
Hey. Hello. I think we have like 3 minutes to go.
Yep. Time.
And here's Jane. She told me today, she was in the library today and told me she'd be here.
Yep, there she is.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hi.
Hey, Arlen's back. Yeah, hi,
Yeah, good
Arlen.
to see you, Arlen.
And Ruth is back.
And Ruth, yes.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of still here. Actually, I'm outside the library at the moment.
In your car.
In your car.
Yeah, I can wave at you through the window.
Yeah. Laura could wave and say hi.
Well, I'm upstairs, so that wouldn't quite
Right,
work.
that
But
takes care of
Oh,
that.
you can't see me.
no.
Now, Jeannie, are you in Florida?
I am. I came down when Sally hit because she came right to our backyard. We didn't have much damage. A little fence post here, a few things. But now we're waiting for Delta to show up. That's this week now, Thursday, Friday. And that's, hopefully it'll go west. Won't hit us. Hopefully it'll stay away.
Now, have your kids been there?
Not yet. They come next week unless something happens. Indianapolis has fall break next week.
Okay.
So,
Fall break.
fall break. I know. They start school in August. They start school at the beginning of August. And they went back right back to the classroom. They did not do virtual at all.
Oh, is that
no,
right?
This is third grade. This isn't upper grade. This is third grade. So, yeah.
Wow.
Any for COVID?
No, everything is, they do a lot of precautions, you know, like
Okay.
they really contained the classes, but no problems at all. No, it's been more.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're gonna get started pretty soon. Is everyone here?
Well, I think Linda's coming, right? Arlen, isn't Linda coming?
You're supposed to be.
Yeah.
She may
I
have
know.
forgotten. I forgot. I didn't remind her.
Well, I saw her this morning, but we didn't talk about this. Maybe.
I can text her. Yeah, I usually have to remind her.
Oh,
We can wait another minute maybe and then
Michelle, I see a little bit of fall color back there behind you, looking good.
Well, I'm sitting with the camera intentionally aiming out towards Green Bay. This is half a mile away, so you don't see the water, but you do see the ash trees and whatever. Nature's paintbrush has been busy.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
The green, the yellows, yes. Beautiful.
That's an ash tree, and it may be stressed, but maybe why it's yellow, but it's still beautiful.
It is beautiful. Very pretty.
Okay, and there's somebody here named iPhone. That's the only name I get.
That's me,
Then
probably.
me?
No,
Yeah.
Oh, or maybe it's Linda. That could be Linda.
No, it isn't
Hey,
Linda.
it's
Next to
Linda.
It's hi, Linda.
Hello.
Hi,
I
Linda.
connected. Oh,
So,
okay.
iPhone, what is your name, please?
Yes.
Well, I'm Chris House.
Oh,
I
that's
don't
you.
know.
Chris.
Okay, well,
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Oh,
you're in the car.
I'm in my car outside the library because I had
there
to run.
you go.
Well, so is Ruth.
So is
So am I. I
Oh,
don't
are
know where you are. You across the street from me, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, well, let's get started here since we have quite a few people. And I quickly wanted to just show you our library calendar because I want everyone to be aware of, I think most of you know how to get into these, but I want you to see that in November, I'm learning to use these things also, so hold on 1 minute. Okay, here's the library website, doorcountylibrary.org, and if you go to our calendar, you know that we have this event on there today, and I put some links there that just this morning, so you might want to check this out after we have our discussion. Down here is a link to Tracy Chevalier's website, and it has some background on this book. And
Oh,
also,
cool.
I watched a really fun discussion she had very recently in England with a bookstore association person, and it's kind of fun because she talks about the pandemic and the whole thing, and it gives you real insight into who she is. So I'd love to have you all go and watch it if you're interested after the discussion today. And then also, if you go to November, I know a lot of you have joined our history book group in the past, and we have John Harris is going to be staying later than normal. He'd normally have this in October, but he's going to be doing his discussion on the 12th of November at 2 o'clock, and it's going to be the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, which is a pretty important book. I don't know if you've come across it, but he talks about working with death row people in the South who cannot afford lawyers. He's a pretty remarkable man himself.
It's a very moving book.
Very moving, yeah. And I was fortunate enough to see Brian Stevenson some years ago at a public library conference, and he was very impressive. So there's also a film about that's
Yeah.
based on that book too, if you're interested. So I just wanted to point that out, that those resources are there, and I've been putting some links up on those websites. And also next month we're doing They're There by Tommy Orange. I don't know if anyone's read that book yet, but
Yes.
it's a pretty powerful book.
Twice I read it.
It's not exactly a happy book, but it's important, I think, and it is in November, Thanksgiving month, so it's kind of pertinent.
Good choice.
And Tommy Orange himself, again, I watched some really interesting videos where he talks about his background, and he kind of does social work, so it's coming from that. It kind of also reminds me of Olive Kitteridge in being sort of a string of short stories. So that all come together at the end. So I'd highly recommend that one for next month. I hope to see you all there. Okay, today we have Remarkable Creatures, and this book was a long time coming because we had it on our list originally, but had to postpone it because we didn't have any digital versions when we first had trouble getting library books in people's hands. So it was voted on a second time, so it's definitely one that people wanted to read. I hope everyone enjoyed it. There is a new film that's just out. It was released on September 11th. Has anyone heard of it? The name of it is Ammonite.
Yeah.
That's the title of the
I saw it, but that it was the release, but I haven't seen where, is it in theaters? Where is it released?
I think that you can see it possibly online. I found that if you
Oh,
go
okay.
type in the title and then go to either IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, sometimes they'll tell you where you can access the film, like Netflix or Hulu or all these different things that they have these days. It's a maze, but it was just released. It was put out by BBC Films, and I was kind of interested after reading the book. What's the connection with this book? But apparently in 2017, the author, Tracy Chevalier, signed a contract to have the book put into a film. But if you look at the plot of the book, it's a little different from the book. I mean, the plot of the film is different from the book. So it should be interesting to see what they came up with in the end. But back to the book. How did everyone like it? Any first impressions?
I remember liking it very much. I read it some time ago, but my impressions are still very vivid, and that's not always true a year or so after you read something. So I liked its depiction of women in that age and the amount of independence that they had or didn't have, the struggles for that.
And then it was a true story. Made it very impressive, I think, because
Well, it was based on it was based on truth.
Yes, yes.
It was based on truth. And if you listen to any of Tracy Chevalier's interviews, and she did an excellent PR, she talks about how it was important for her to be the voice of Mary Anning, but she needed to find a way to create that voice. And Elizabeth is real, don't misunderstand me, but through Elizabeth that she felt she could, in this interview, she says she feels that she could create Mary's voice. And that I was happy to read about it because I was happy to learn about those two women. Very happy to receive Chevalier's interpretation of a friendship between those two women, but that was in Chevalier's imagination. That was not necessarily true.
Right.
It is true that Elizabeth defends her against the men and says she's the one who found stuff, but see, between the two of them is the craft of Chevalier.
Right. And on her website, I showed you that link that I put up to her website. She actually lists some of the people who are real, who are in the book, and gives a little background. But she sort of had to invent who they really were because this is pretty early on, the early 1800s. And there's not a lot out there about Mary Anning herself. And that's what's, go on, Arlen.
Well, I just said to know she existed. I mean, how many of us knew that there was such a person before?
Correct.
Yeah, and I was going to say the next book that I read, and I know Jane's read it, A Simple Thread, about the embroiderers in Winchester Cathedral. The same thing. We never would have known these women existed if it weren't for Tracy, I think, because
Right.
One thing that's amazing
Yes,
is
Linda.
this woman that was self-taught
Yes.
pre-Darwin, and Darwin uses her study. She doesn't get credit for it, but I mean, I think it's just amazing. I really do, that the scientists come to her. Eventually.
Right.
But the fact that she was pre-Darwin.
I read the book. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I looked online and it's interesting. There now are a lot of children's books about Mary Anning. You will see even the London Natural History Museum has a considerable amount of information on her. And it's just interesting that, you go back now, you have a lot of books, but, again, in history, she's like so many other, I think, people that we know that they existed, they had a profound impact. But, had it not been for this book and for others, we may never have known about it. The men seem to just, take what she found and then come up with their theories and never even dawn on them to give her credit, that to even acknowledge her, which I think, of course, is very much, symptomatic of that time. But it's real interesting. If you go online and just look, there's a lot out there and very reputable scientific, journals, etc., on Mary Anning today, which is really cool to see.
Well, thanks for sharing that they're out there with children's books, but that makes sense. Children are into fossils and dinosaurs, but that's great the kids know about her. That's fabulous.
When I first read the book, I didn't realize she had been a real person. She lived, and when I realized it and started looking it up, I was just amazed at what she had. I had recommended the book to friends of mine who were going over to England, and they felt the same way about the book, and they wound up going to Lyme Regis, and they actually went to her museum and saw the fossils. And Laura, I emailed you a photo from there. I was amazed at the size of what she found. There's one little woman in the corner of the photo in this huge, enormous.
Oh, really?
Replica. Yeah, if you Google Mary Anning Museum, you'll see these photos, and it's just enormous, and you wonder how she got that out of those rocks. And it's amazing. And that and the religious aspect of it, I think, was interesting. That
Oh, yeah.
at the time, they all thought that everything God made was still alive, and pretty controversial for her to decide that it really wasn't a crocodile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Darwin had to do a lot of that, but not until the 1850s, really, or much later than Mary Anning. She died in, I think, 1847.
Yeah.
So he didn't really say much till later. Go on.
Mom and I were talking about that because we had looked up. Charles Darwin published his Origin of the Species in 1859, and what Mom has read, that he really struggled with coming up with this notion of evolution. That wasn't just something that he really personally struggled with it. So it's just kind of interesting. She was before that time, so those ideas were sounds like just beginning to, start to see some light of day, but it was definitely much.
And I came across an interesting film on Charles Darwin called Creation on Amazon Prime, if anyone has that. It's one of the free ones. And it's, I guess his wife was very religious. So that was a problem in his life. So in this book, though, since we were talking about religion, there's the there's the Church of England, and then what was the name of the other group? I forget what they called it.
Congregationalist or something?
Yeah,
Yes.
which was the second, the Mary Anning's group. And I don't know a lot about it, but it's, I know that they did have a lot of conflict in those days between the two groups. Does anyone have anything, any knowledge of that?
No.
I didn't fully understand that part of the book. I thought she might have developed that a little better, or at least good enough for me to get it.
Yeah. Well, she seemed more focused on the fossils and the whole collecting, and she makes it clear that some people were the people who found the fossils, the hunters, and then the collectors who were people buying fossils.
Right.
And putting their names on it. Right.
Largely men.
Yeah.
Who were, they wanted to own it. And that was kind of, for them, that was their whole shtick, rather than the excitement of the hunters and the discoveries. And, that seemed to be more with the female characters.
And what did you think about the two characters? I mean, Mary and then Elizabeth are different ages and different social groups. Now, apparently in this film, the new film, Elizabeth doesn't really play a role. There's another woman in it. And of course, in modern trends, they make it a lesbian relationship between Mary and the other woman. So,
That's really wrong.
yeah, how does that spin this?
Because that isn't what was going on. What was going on was a mentorship that develops into a friendship.
Yeah.
and cross classes, which was very incredible at that time, that a spinster of means would associate with a working class young girl, and that she would mentor her. In Chevalier's interpretation, remember, she teaches her to read,
Yes.
which is a major accomplishment. And in Chevalier, well, it's true that she does defend him against Courier, the Frenchman, that says she's, you know, she's Mary's fabricated things, that it isn't Mary's discovery. But that's just wrong to say
Yeah.
they were lesbians. That's just
Well, and they had to create another character in order to do that. According to Tracy Chevalier's website, Elizabeth was a real woman and friends with Mary.
right.
I have it written here. Elizabeth was often mentioned in letters Mary Anning wrote. Apparently, the two went out fossil hunting together almost daily.
Yes.
So that really did exist. So I don't know if I'll get angry watching this film because they twist it so much to try to make it trendy.
Trendy, you're right. It sells. That's what sells to the public is, yeah, make it trendy.
Sex will sell.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's just so wrong, because it's just so wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Also,
not-
it's the whole thing.
I don't know anything about the movie, but I mean, but it's not the same characters. It's a different character she supposedly has an affair with. It's not Elizabeth.
No, it's a whole different person they have to bring in to.
It's somebody that she was helping her, or the guy was helping her. No, he hired her to help his convalescing wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about it, but it is done by the people the gal that did Little Women, the latest version of Little Women. And so whether that, I don't know.
Yeah, but, we'll have to see the film and then talk about that sometime.
I really like this book, and I sometimes I thought, like, I didn't really possibly agree with her fictionalized version of maybe some of the things that went on. However, that's her interpretation, and it was interesting. I really liked the fact, like we said before, that she was self-taught, Mary, and she actually just, like, really got into this and could put those fossils together. That's absolutely amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
That she could do that. And also Lyme Regis, I really wanted to go to Lyme Regis after I read it. And, like, I wonder how hard it is to really walk on those beaches, though. And it didn't seem like that was an easy, like when they actually went up on the rocks and stuff, it seems pretty dangerous, really. Possibly.
It was. I think later on, her dog was killed on one of their outings by a landslide.
And she herself was caught in one.
Right.
And Elizabeth rescued her.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they weren't doing this in high-tech Eddie Bauer gear. They were doing
Yeah, that's true. They were doing it in long skirts.
They were doing it in long skirts and shoes that were probably not. I mean, it's kind of like the saying, remember, Ginger Rogers did exactly what Fred Astaire did, only she did it backwards in high heels.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a similar analogy, which makes it even more stunning that these two women accomplished what they did.
I agree with you. I thought about that. I couldn't walk in those skirts down the street, I don't think, let alone be, and wet. Their skirts must have gotten really wet too.
Yeah, because remember at one point Mary ties up her skirt when she ties it up, and then is it Birch that Mary's romantically and wants to be romantic with?
Yeah.
Birch comes, she's all discombobulated and has to untie it. That's when I really thought about, my God.
Yeah.
To do that in those clothes.
I'm assuming that the part of the story that Mary was struck by lightning when she was young.
Oh, yeah.
Which set her apart as a person in the community. Remember, that kind of gave her, like, she was different from the others, and she used that, I guess, to her advantage.
And that must have seemed really miraculous back then. More than even now it is.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah, and that part is true, apparently.
And what really struck me too is being a woman in that time period, how difficult it really was. And they not only, you know, they broke out of those norms. I mean, I was just like, even Elizabeth, you know, there were very strict rules that they had to follow. They couldn't be out in public, or they couldn't this, they couldn't that. So
There seems
they
to
were,
be a lot more freedom in the country than in the rural villages than in London, of course,
oh yeah,
which she
yes.
illustrated pretty well, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, her escape to go to the auction was incredible, where
Yeah.
I love that part. I have read several other books by this author, and the one that I remember the most is The Girl with the Pearl Earring. I really transported to 16th century or 17th century Holland on that film. I didn't quite feel as strongly with this one. I'm not sure why, but this is a wonderful writer. She really creates a historical atmosphere with some strong women.
Does anyone remember we read, I don't know how many of you were here with the group when we read Falling Angels some time ago? Does anyone remember that? It's about a cemetery in Highgate in London and two different families.
Yeah.
And at that time, I remember doing research on the author, and she apparently she lives in London. She's married to, she's from the United States, but married to a British person and lives in London, and she redecorates her office every time she writes a book, according to what she said at that time. If you watch that video that I posted on the library calendar, she shows briefly around her office and talks about how she writes. I think she writes everything by hand, which is pretty amazing when you think of it. But she does have a collection of fossils there in her office that she collected. I think she first came across this idea for this book when she was with, I forget if it's one of her relatives, one of her children, at a museum in Dorchester or someplace around England, and saw these fossils and then got this idea of writing the book. So she's an interesting person in just trying to create an atmosphere and then trying to write about it, as you were saying, Adele.
Does a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of questions here, and one of them, which we kind of talked about a little. How would you characterize the relationship between Mary and Elizabeth, mother, daughter, sister, or something else?
Mentorship.
Mentor,
Yeah.
mentor
It
student.
morphs into friendship.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking mentor, but then I thought colleagues, really, because who's mentoring who?
They become colleagues, but not in the beginning.
So you think Mary's the raw talent and Elizabeth showing her how to document everything properly? Is that how you see it? Or the other way around?
Not completely. I think Elizabeth is the more educated of the two, and she teaches Mary teaching her to read is major.
Right.
I would just characterize Elizabeth as the enabler.
Yeah.
And I'm not
That's
sure
a
what
good
word I would put to Mary, but she was the product of the enabling.
Enabling and championing. Yeah, I don't know,
Well,
but it's interesting because Elizabeth also got to learn from Mary. You know, there was
They eventually teach each other.
it's true. It's true even today in academic things that if you don't know how to present yourself, and if you don't present your things in the right format, they have to be very, very formal and very careful to be taken seriously. And otherwise people will just look down on your work and doubt that you've done anything. So it was important for her to have someone who knew a little bit better, you know, the right grammar, the right order of things, the footnoting, if you will, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So they really were a team. Yes?
yeah, that very first discovery when she finds the croc, and it's Elizabeth who says, let's hire a couple of guys, let's get the guys to cut them out, you know, cut out the whole skeleton and get it back up for you to work on. I mean, it wouldn't have dawned on her, nor would she have the resources or the means to do that. So really, even her whole Mary's first part of her career was helped along by Elizabeth.
What Mary's thing that she enjoyed was collecting the fish fossils. Has she got any fame for doing that, or was that not as big a deal to get a fish?
Yes, her collection of fish fossils is at Oxford. If you look her up, her collection of fish fossils is at Oxford. But she didn't only help Mary, she helped the whole family, because she's the one who pushes the brother into being an upholsterer, and that will give them financial stability. And she's the one that the mother is very resistant about her, but the mother realizes what she's done for her. And remember when the mother treks up to where the three sisters live to ask for help?
Yep.
Mary helps the whole, Mary's influence, Elizabeth's influence on the whole family. And it goes back to what Ruth was saying, in a broader sense, she teaches them what possibilities are. What Adele said, she enables them, but she helps the whole family, because the brother clearly does not want to be out there doing this.
Although didn't he find the first one?
Yeah, he does, but it's not his passion. He goes because it's the way when the father dies that they can earn money, because they sell the stuff. So he does it out of obligation. But I don't remember why Elizabeth knows that he's a good upholsterer, or that's what he wants to do.
He said he wanted to do that at some point.
But Elizabeth encourages that, and that greatly helps the family's stability. It allows the mother to set up the curio shop, and it allows Mary to go out there every day and dig. So Elizabeth is a really pivotal character.
I also thought Mary's mother was really very clever on how she managed the store and the family, and she was a wheeler dealer with these things. She was good. I liked her a lot.
I agree. I think she's fascinating.
Or was she created by the author? Did anybody find anything about that?
I didn't find anything, but I think it goes back to what somebody said about the fact that women in the country had more independence than women in the city. Women in the country weren't all bundled up into, you can only do this, you can only do that. Women in the country had to work and survive, and the mother works and survives and maintains her family.
But also, she pointed out that Mary had a bad reputation in the community for her behavior. What were you going to say, Adele?
I was thinking there were some norms. One of which was Mary was not to go down to the beach alone without a man, without another woman present, which she did, and it came back to bite her. The rest of the men ignored her. She was not marriageable because of
That was the one thing. That was the one thing. Well, there were other things, but that was the one really blatant thing that transferred between the city and the country. The goal was to get married.
Yep.
The three spinsters couldn't get married. It was decided by their brother, who had the money, who was in charge, that they weren't marryable. So ship them off to Lyme Regis.
But you know, the spinsters more autonomy. They had a lot more independence than.
Yeah, but they still got shipped out. I mean, and it was cheaper to keep them down there and let them to come home for like 6 weeks and experience London. But the one norm in both classes was you were supposed to get married. That was
That's what Jane Austen books or novels are all about, right?
Yeah. And Jane Austen did visit Lyme Regis.
Yeah.
I think their paths could have crossed.
I think that I read they did.
Well, she's mentioned in the book. She goes to Mary's father to have Mary's father make some sort of cabinetry. and finds him too expensive, and so she's out.
I think
And
there,
just
I read there was a real time when they connected that Jane Austen did order something from the father or something like that. That's not made up.
Oh, so last night we happened to watch the film, the Jane Austen Book Club. I wanted something light to take my mind off the stuff that's going on in Washington. And Lyme Regis is mentioned several times in the book, in the movie. So I felt interesting that the two things came across my thought process in the same time frame.
Well, Lyme Regis is in that string of very popular seaside places where rich people went, right in Lyme Regis, and that whole going to the sea and getting away starts in this area. And
But it was not as upscale as some others. That's mentioned
Right.
at the beginning.
right.
There were several other places where they could have settled. But
If the brother would have let him.
yeah. Yep, if they could have afforded it or whatever. Anyway, how fortuitous that they end up where they did.
Has anyone read Sanditon, the last Jane Austen novel, partially written novel? We did a thing for that on Learning in Retirement, and that Jane Austen makes up an imaginary seaside town that's
Right.
kind of like this, that they're trying to make popular.
The PBS was very good.
PBS did it.
And they
Yeah.
made a series based on it where they wrote the rest of the story.
And
I
was
think Andrew Davies.
disappointed to hear that they weren't going to make a sequel, because I was hoping there would be one.
There might be yet, who
I don't
knows?
know.
But yeah, that was the trend back then, was to have these seaside towns. So they were popular, but as they point out in the book, you don't live there all year unless you can't afford to.
Yeah.
Well, here's someone else waiting to come into the group, a little late. Or did she log
There
out?
you
Oh,
are.
there she came back.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
My phone overheated in the sun.
Oh, it's done.
So I think this book was very compatible with the Jane Austen novels, showing the position of women
Yes.
in the society.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah,
was
we were
writing.
in
Go on.
their 20s, you know? Just rather funny that you're a spinster in your young 20s.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it was back then, right?
They didn't live that long. They had to do everything early.
Mary
Yeah,
Anning was 47 when she died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary Anning was 47, right?
Right. In the NPR interview, Chevalier says that the original title she thought of was "She Sells Seashells by the Seashore," and that was a ditty that was coined in 1908 that was in honor of Mary Anning, but she not to call it that because she said, "I can't keep saying that." And you just, what do you think? What do you think of the title? Who are the remarkable creatures?
That's very good. Good question.
Yeah. I think the women definitely. I mean, it's probably a, nod, of course, to the fossils and what they're, these unusual creatures that they're finding. But I think the women, especially for that time period, were remarkable.
I think it's an all-encompassing title.
Yes.
Very open to interpretation. Yes.
And there's also a question here. At different points in the novel, both Mary and Elizabeth have reason to think that they themselves might become fossils. What did each woman mean by that?
Oh. I especially think it must have been difficult for the women like Elizabeth and her sisters to know that your life, it's determined for you. This is what you're going to be. Yeah, a spinster, that's your role. It had to be very difficult to say, okay, well, that's it. This is where I belong. Hard.
And you're also totally dependent on your brother to give you money. And I think what they said, they got 150 pounds a year, that they weren't living lavishly at all.
And that's again, Jane Austen's, what happened to her. She was a spinster, and dependent on her brother.
Yes.
So,
Particularly the
So
sister.
be nice to your brother.
Really, particularly the sister that I really felt sorry for was, I don't remember what her name was, but one that was socially gregarious to go out.
Yeah.
Louise.
And,
Louise.
Margaret and Louisa.
right, and as that passed, as her time, as she got older, and it became infinitely obvious that there was no chance she would marry, she didn't go anymore. And that was what she did. She went out. She liked to go and have social life. And she looked forward to the season. And as she aged, she didn't get to go.
yeah.
It just reemphasizes what you said, Jean, about, you know, their life was totally determined by their brother and that they were spinsters. You know, I mean, it's just, ugh.
Right. Yeah, I felt sorry for her too. I mean, especially if you were an extrovert and really, you know, were a social person. You know, I think maybe the other sisters were more introverts, more happy to be at home. But if you weren't that person, man, that must have been hard.
That was Margaret, I think. That's it.
Yeah.
Did anybody else notice that alternating chapters were in different voices? One would be in Mary's voice, and the language there was clearly the language of a not very well educated rural woman. And then the next chapter would be Elizabeth, the more refined. I thought that was very clever writing on the part of the author.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook and that came across very strongly there also.
Well, and they also had the jealousy between the two women where they didn't speak for a while.
Some years, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And what was that about?
A man.
The man,
The only thing you can do in life is be associated with a man and get married. Because
the
Mary,
romance,
because
the
Mary,
potential romance.
well, Mary, I don't think that's romance. Mary falsely thought that the reason, was it Birch? Was that the guy?
Yes.
Colonel Birch.
Falsely thought that because Birch was, you know, going out there with her and paying her, you know, or she wasn't taking money from him for the vessels. So that he had to be in love with her. And Elizabeth had the guts to say to her, no, that's not what's happening. And I interpreted that as Elizabeth wanted Birch. And that was the furthest thing from Elizabeth's mind. I don't think Elizabeth cared whether she had a man or not. I think Elizabeth was self-sufficient.
By this point, yeah. Yeah, Mary would literally point the way for this guy to pick them up. She dropped her tool right next to a fossil at one point. So, oh, here it is. How amazing.
Yes.
And I think that I read after I read the book that he actually did really help out her and the family financially
In real life.
in real life. I mean,
Well, it does say he existed. Where did you read something about him helping out?
yeah, I did. I mean, I started looking everything up. I can't, you know, like I read it a couple months
In
ago,
the
but
book, he was the one that donated all the money from the auction to the family, or gave all the money from the auction. That's what he did in the book. I don't know about real life.
I think it was more than that, but I don't remember exactly.
And one of the questions here is, in the end, do you consider him a decent man? Because he was a little bit of a character, you know, a con man in the beginning in a way,
Right.
taking advantage of the situation.
I don't know if I saw it that way. I think he was clueless. I think he was so enthusiastic about getting the fossils because in his mind, to be associated with someone of Mary's standing would never have worked. He had to be associated marriage-wise with somebody of his own standing. So I think he was just into his fossils. I don't know, but maybe that was my take.
I agree. I think he was clueless. But he was nice clueless.
Yes, nice clueless.
Nice to Mary. He didn't browbeat her.
Right.
He didn't berate her.
But didn't he take her into cemetery or the woods at one point.
Yep, they did, yeah.
I
Yeah.
get that impression. He was not totally innocent.
Well, he's a man. Yes.
But what, I'm sorry, I don't remember that. Does anything happen? I mean, why did they go to the woods?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons Mary thought that he was going to marry her. Or,
Oh, okay, all right. I guess I just,
The
Yeah.
implication is that something happened.
yes.
right, but that implication I think is pretty important because implication in those days, good heavens,
Oh, yeah, oh, that's fact.
implication in those days makes what happens with teenagers now, they'd be damned to hell. I mean, it's society norms. I think he just wanted to be the big guy with fossils. I think he wanted to be the big name fossils. And I think he is a decent guy because I think in the book, at least, when he gives the proceeds of the auction to the family, he's admitting that Mary's the one that found it. Even,
Yeah, I think some of it should.
even though she dropped the tool right in front of him, I just think that he was looking to carve a name for himself. He was looking for, I can afford this. I can be the big guy in fossils. I don't think he gave a damn about what he was the big guy in. This was an easy thing to be the big guy in,
When Elizabeth went to see him and realized that he was pretty much penniless and saw that he was planning on marrying the wealthier woman, the other woman, the one he eventually married, I think she saw what the reality was. Yes. That's why he was married.
Important for him too. It's pointed out several times that he wore his old military uniform, even though it was threadbare, but that was important to him, I guess, to his social standing and his general place in the world.
Yeah, his military uniform allowed him things. I mean, even though think about it, even though people are penniless, if they have the right pedigree and they marry the wealthy woman or the wealthy man, everything changes. But there are many examples of, the whole phenomena that happens in the late 1880s when penniless, rich, aristocratic British men
Married rich
women.
Downton Abbey.
Yeah, exactly. And so the pedigree is what's really important in his class. And it's also important in his class that you're known for something. And he was known for fossils.
And his military service.
Yes, and that's why he wore the threadbare uniform.
Yeah. Even though it was no longer the stylish uniform, I think that's mentioned at one point, that they had upgraded or redesigned the military uniforms, but he was still wearing the passé or out of style or out of favor uniforms.
But I don't think he was taking advantage of Mary because he didn't pay her. He used up all her time when she should have been doing things for sale. And it didn't occur to him, or he didn't notice it until Elizabeth pointed it out to him, I think. So,
And then the mother helped too. Didn't the mothers come in and demand more money also at some point with him? Mary's mother? I think,
She was pretty sharp about asking for money when she needed to.
Yeah.
Linda pointed out that she had emailed me a picture of the fossils, and I forgot to bring it. I apologize, but I just now checked online and found some pictures of the museum. So I'm going to quickly show you because they are pretty amazing.
oh, good.
Let's see if I can do this.
Think positively. We're all learning how to do all of this.
So here is an example of someone next to one of the fossils.
Oh, okay.
Oh, cool.
Pretty huge.
My goodness, look at the size.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I think there was someone who dressed up as Mary. here
Oh,
also.
there you go.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can really see how huge it is. Whoops, see
Look
if
at the
that'll
hat.
open up. And that's a real painting of Mary back there also, that you'll see. So there she is. It
You know,
really
I
is
was just,
large.
when I was amazed at how the size of it, I had no idea when they were carving it out and how they got these brick masons or whatever they were to dig it out for 'em.
Yeah.
Remember when the one scientist accused Mary of putting the paddles or the on backwards, and she, you know, that all that
Yeah.
just to discredit her? Yeah.
The vertebrae, another vertebrae.
Ah.
So anyway, that's the size. It really is amazing when you think about it, that they were able to do that back then in the middle of, like, we go fossil hunting here in Door County, but it's not that
Not that big.
difficult. You tend to do it on the next to the water where it's
Yeah.
flat.
There's no tide schedule to think about.
Yeah.
Yes, the tide for sure. You don't want to get caught with that out there, definitely.
Well,
Yeah,
she had the tide up against the steep cliff, was her.
Yeah. You're stuck. Yes. No way out.
Yeah.
The fact that she had the wisdom to look at it as a whole and not just take part of it and say this. I mean, there are just so many things about her that were just serendipitous. I mean, she just was incredible.
She just had the right eye.
She did say her dad had a lot of knowledge. Her dad had given her some of the knowledge that she had to begin with. I think she said that.
Right. Her father was into it, but I mean, well, I'm just amazed by it. I'm amazed by it now, but even then with the lack of materials, the clothing the lack of support materials, the clothing she had on, you know, I mean, and then Elizabeth, as someone pointed out, is the one that says, well, let's get somebody to help us move this, you know, and let's do this. And so again, another situation where Elizabeth is official in lots of ways.
And someone was mentioning Elizabeth and her fish collection. I see in the Tracy Chevalier website, it said that in 1834, a Swiss scientist, Louis Agassiz, studied the fish collection and named a fish after her. It's called the Eugnathus philpottii. So philpottii, after Elizabeth. So it really was a fish collection that existed.
There you go.
How nice of the man to name
it. Yeah.
After the woman who found all of it.
Yep.
Back to what you're talking about, the tide coming in and the cliffs. I thought that was interesting when there was competition. Like if you found something, you didn't want anybody else to know you found it on the cliff. You were kind of guarding it because somebody else was going to come along. And as the tides came and went and washed more of it away, that had to be kind of a very competitive, fascinating time when that was all going on.
Well, and I'm assuming those big fossils she found, that only parts of it were showing and they had to dig out the rest of it. And yeah, if you can't dig it out in a day, which that one didn't looked like a long a long time to dig that out, somehow you had to protect it.
Yep.
Has anyone ever been to Ashfall National Park in Nebraska? If you want to see fossils that are in similar, that's what the book reminded me of. The farmer was plowing his field one day and noticed what looked like a hippo skull in a cliff, and they went on to discover all kinds of animals, prehistoric and modern day animals that had been buried in volcanic ash. And who knew we ever had these kind of animals in America before they found this site of animals. And of course, the smallest ones died first and the bigger ones died last because they ingested the glass from the lava. And if you go there, they have a pit where you can look down and see the actual animals as they're excavated. Some of them are excavated, and you can see their skeletons. and as they were buried. So if you're ever out in mid-Nebraska, central Nebraska, it's a fascinating, and there's no one ever there, no one ever goes, but I happen to be teaching near there. So when it was all discovered. So it's it reminded me that it can happen anywhere, you know, just because it happened in the 1800s. This happened in the 1960s, I think.
What's the name again?
So 70s. Ashfall, Ashfall.
Nebraska.
It's amazing. It's just amazing to see these animals. There was a wolf bear, there were camels. Camels lived in that part of the country. Yes. So I always recommend that park to anybody traveling or wanting to see something different in a remote area.
Mm-hmm.
National Geographic this month has a whole issue on dinosaurs. How how they're rediscovering things about dinosaurs. They say they've learned more in the past 20 years than they knew in the last 250 years about them.
So all the things that we learned back in the Dark Ages aren't true anymore.
Probably not.
Well, we didn't know they were related to birds way back, did we?
No, we didn't know that.
Yeah, or that they had feathers, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot we didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, you know how they always say you only know what you teach? So as I taught third grade in Illinois, I had to study Illinois. And at one time, the whole area around Chicago was all an inland sea, you know, before the continents all shifted. So that's why we find a lot of the fossils in the Chicago area way inland from Lake Michigan that are from a sea animal that you would not find, you know, anyplace else but in the ocean because it was an inland sea. So there you go.
And around here, it was the Silurian era, and that was an inland sea also.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, yeah.
Really? Say that again. I always tell tourists it's from the Silurian period, and I never know what Silurian. Okay.
Silurian, not Cerulean. Silurian. S-I-L.
What am I telling tourists that I know nothing about?
They have a good display at the Whitefish Bay Park in the building there.
I recommend that they go there, but yeah, because ask you questions like, well, what can you tell me the history of the area? And I'm like, when do you want me to start? You know, it's been building up for thousands of years. You want me to start there? You want me to start when the village was founded? You know.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing to think that Wisconsin used to be on the equator.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Before things shifted. Yes. Yeah. Everything was warmer. Yeah.
And I've yet to encounter a geologist or anyone that knew I was pronouncing it incorrectly.
That's interesting, but yeah.
No,
Well, go have a look at Whitefish Bay when they open the buildings up again. They have a really good display there. But also they do periodically, they'll do things at Crossroads on that. I've been to things over there on that subject. So
I'll have to go.
well, does anyone have anything else to say about this book?
Thank you, whoever recommended it.
Yeah, I like it. I love it.
And we did vote on it twice, so it's specially chosen.
Well, and after listening to the discussion today, I appreciate the book all the more. I think I'm going to have to reread it. It's been a couple of years since I've read it, but interesting discussion. Thanks for sharing all you have shared.
Yeah, and I do like historical fiction that makes you want to learn more about the time and the subject. I know we've had discussions where some people feel historical fiction is false. It's not, it's fake news, but it does make you interested and make you want to learn more. And this book sure does that. So it'll be interesting to see the movie, even though I have questions about it.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of these books, people sign contracts to have films made, and then they don't have any connection with what's actually done.
It is quite unusual if they get to even be part of it at all. They usually don't. They just sign away their rights, and that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
I think there should be
Go ahead, Ruth.
I think there should be a special category for the kind of what you call historical fiction that Chevalier writes, and that whoever that was that wrote the story about Hemingway's Paris wife.
Paula McLean.
Yeah.
Paula McLean, yeah.
Yeah. There should be a special category for those because they are so grounded in fact.
In research.
And all they give us, and research, and all they give us as fiction is the internal thoughts of the character and some of the things that it's hard to know, but that are very probable. It ought to be a category of its own.
Right. Believable historical fiction, or something like that. Yeah. I also think all of us enjoy reading about strong women, and
Yes.
this audience for sure, and this book filled that in a big way.
Yeah. Especially this year when we're just celebrating suffrage in this country.
Yes. Everybody
Yay.
vote.
Well, thank you.
I voted already.
Think about
Already.
what was going on when suffrage got accomplished. They also were in a pandemic.
Yep.
Right. It's true.
Makes
Really
it even
after,
more
yeah.
important that we all go vote.
So
That's pretty interesting. It's an interesting thought.
it took a decade, took a century, and we still haven't solved everything. But do vote.
Right.
Have a great month. Wonderful to see all
We're
of
still voting.
Laura, as always, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
And I'll see you next month.
See you in November.
Maybe for both the history book group and this book group. That'd be great.
Great. Yeah.
I think
great.
our next book is actually Election Day.
Is it?
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be Tuesday.
But remember, we're not gonna hear the results right away.
Yeah.
Especially not at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
No.
No, that's true.
It can take
Anyway,
our mind off.
take care.
Well,
Okay.
thank you,
Bye.
and see you next month. Bye.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.